Have you ever felt like stress is silently pulling the strings of your health? Today we're diving into the hidden connections between chronic stress, the inflammation that it causes, and how it may trigger autoimmunity. We're going to talk about the fight or flight response to the secrets of how the gut is impacted, and we're going to uncover this domino effect that stress sets in motion. So stay with us. Welcome to the Hashimoto's Doctor Podcast. You're now part of a growing community of people determined to take their health back through education and self-empowerment. But because of the healthcare system today, we don't have access to the types of healthcare that we want. So we have to do things differently. We've got to do things smarter, and we do that by becoming our own advocates. This podcast will give you the perspective and thoughts of one of the world's leading Hashimoto's doctors. So let's get started. Welcome back to the Hashimoto's Doctor Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brad Shook, and today we're going to take a close look at a topic that affects us all, stress. But we're not just going to discuss the occasional stressful day. What we're going to do is take a look at how stress has this profound effect on our health and how it could potentially lead to autoimmune disease if we're exposed to it over a long period of time. So let's dive in and uncover the connections. Stress. It's a term we're all too familiar with, but did you know that our body's response to stress is actually deeply rooted in ancient survival mechanisms? And this is actually part of our involuntary nervous system. This is our division of that autonomic, which is the autonomic nervous system. It's an involuntary part of our system that runs all of the functions of our body without us having to think about it. The division called the sympathetic nervous system drives what has been termed the fight or flight response. And when we're under stress, this part of our nervous system, the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, drives the fight or flight response. And this has this cascading effect of different types of hormones being released. And these hormones, including cortisol and adrenaline, drive this fight or flight response. And it is really this adaptive mechanism to try and keep us safe in a short-term acute situation where something happens and we need to act really quickly. It changes all of these physiological functions so that we can adapt and survive. But in our modern world, this system is being activated every day by chemical stressors, by physical pain, by emotional stressors. These are all things that we are burdened with on a daily basis that prior to our modern lifestyle, we probably didn't have. And so we are in a situation now where we are under constant stress. And this system is being activated. And these consequences are what we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to give you some ideas and strategies on how you might be able to better adapt to these chronic stressors. This is something that I see in practice with almost everyone that I work with. This is an essential part of the puzzle that we have to address, or optimizing someone's health, dampening autoimmunity, and just getting them healthy is impossible. When our fight or flight response is triggered, there is a surge in the hormone cortisol. Now, cortisol plays crucial roles in our body, but a chronic long-term elevation can lead to a lot of problems. It disrupts our body's natural rhythms, our sleep patterns, and it can also create a lot of issues with things that you may not think about as being associated with stress, like thyroid hormone conversion. It can also lead to some issues that are really something that not many people are aware of, but it can affect our gut. It can affect our immune barrier systems. And one of these things in particular is our intestinal barrier, which is critical for normal immune system regulation and function. That's why this is a critical piece of the autoimmune puzzle. Elevated cortisol affects the gut by weakening the gut lining, making it more permeable, or leading to a condition that's often referred to as leaky gut. Now, this means that undigested food particles, various types of bacterial fragments, which should be confined to the gut, can actually pass through the intestinal lining into the bloodstream. And this sets the stage for a host of health challenges. Now, there are types of bacteria in our digestive tract that within their cell wall contain something called lipopolysaccharides. And these lipopolysaccharides are extremely inflammatory. So cortisol can lead to gut problems that drives inflammation and can trigger and drive the autoimmune process. Once cortisol has led to the deterioration of the intestinal lining and has induced a state of increased permeability of the gut lining or leaky gut, then partially digested food particles and the bacterial cell wall fragments containing lipopolysaccharides make their way into the bloodstream. Now, this is actually called endotoxemia. These are toxins that are making their way into the bloodstream, and this is well known to be very inflammatory. As a matter of fact, people that are dealing or that become septic are septic because of this translocation or movement from these bacterial cell wall fragments into the bloodstream, driving sepsis. This is incredibly inflammatory, and it's very damaging to our body. So our immune system jumps into action, and it works to try and eliminate these foreign particles, these things that are coming into the bloodstream. Now, this can actually initiate the autoimmune process. So when partially digested food particles, or what we would call peptides, partially digested protein that's found in your food, when it makes its way into the bloodstream, the immune cells, they produce antibodies. Once they identify it as foreign, they start to make antibodies. And you can think of antibodies as tags. And these tags are designed to adhere to very specific molecular shapes. So the shape of this partial protein that's in the blood. These antibodies, in this example, when it's reacting against a food peptide or part of a protein that was from a food, these antibodies are designed to tag and stick to it and mark it as foreign so that other immune cells can very efficiently locate this foreign peptide or this part of this food protein. In this example, we're using this. This can also occur with any type of pathogen or anything foreign. A similar mechanism occurs. And these immune cells, called killer cells, very efficiently can locate this thing, this protein, that the immune system has tagged as foreign. This allows for a more efficient immune response. This is actually called your adaptive immune response. You have another side of the immune system called the innate immune response, which acts more rapidly at the onset of things coming into the body that are foreign. But the adaptive immune response is where you have antibodies that tag these foreign things, whether they be pathogens or partially digested food proteins in this example, and then that allows for other specialized immune cells called killer cells to very efficiently find and eliminate these foreign substances. So this can be a gateway, it can be an initiator, and it can be a perpetuator of the autoimmune process. Now, when you start looking at how the immune system starts or begins reacting to you or your tissues instead of these foreign food proteins or foreign bacteria or fungi or whatever the immune system is reacting to that's foreign, the way that this can trigger autoimmunity is, and I'll say the leading theory, one of the leading theories is through a mechanism called molecular mimicry, where let's use and stay with the food protein example, where that food protein or that partially digested food protein that was in your GI tract, once it moves through into the bloodstream and you make antibodies against it, if any of those antibodies that are tagging that food protein, as they circulate through the bloodstream, as they do, if they come across any of your tissues that are similar in molecular structure, then they may adhere to your tissues and mistakenly tag you as something that's foreign. And then the killer cells, the part of the immune system, as they're in circulation, when they see that antibody tagging your tissue, all they know is that that is a tag marking something as foreign for destruction, and then that can initiate an autoimmune response against that tissue. And at that moment, you have lost self-tolerance, where your immune system is no longer tolerant to that specific tissue. And one of the consequences of chronic stress just could be that the immune system becomes activated through leaky gut by this elevation in cortisol, and that it either triggers or continues to perpetuate and drive the autoimmune process. And I've seen this many times in practice where we're looking in detail at the health history to try and understand underlying mechanisms, like how did we get here? How did this autoimmunity begin? And usually, or I'll say this frequently, you're going to see stressful events can be a trigger. And usually it's a very significant stressful event. Someone loses a loved one, or they have a very stressful time in their life where they may have financial stressors, or maybe they have a surgery or something that's very traumatic that occurs in their life. And these things can be the trigger because they chronically elevate your cortisol. They lead to a breakdown in the immune barrier system in the gut, the intestinal barrier. And then that allows and sets the stage for what we would call translocation, the movement of these partially digested foods as they're passing through your GI tract, and these bacteria that normally live in the GI tract, as they go through their life cycle and they break down and die, their cell walls fragment. And some of these are gram-negative bacteria, which is a type of bacteria that may contain lipopolysaccharides, these highly inflammatory components that when they move into the bloodstream trigger a massive inflammatory response and really set the stage for, again, the triggering and the perpetuation of autoimmunity. This is how stress may lead to autoimmunity and contribute to its ongoing activation. Okay, so now that we understand the lay of the land and a lot of these problems, let's talk about what we can actually do about it. So in this section, you're probably going to want to make some notes. If you're interested in this and you want to understand some of the strategies that we'll use to help support people to minimize stress and to combat some of these problems that arise from chronic stress, then you're going to want to pay attention. So chronic stressors, be it from unhealthy relationships or your demanding work environment or even our own mindset, they can keep our bodies in this constant state of inflammation through driving this sympathetic nervous system response. But the good news is that we can break this cycle, and there's several things that we can do. First of all, just in general, consider prioritizing some downtime and scheduling that into your daily routine or when you can. Even if it's a small type of break where you just go outside and you get a little bit of sun or you go for a little walk during your day to break things up, that's perfect. You can also try to engage in like relaxation techniques and really focus on trying to incorporate some self-care, because that can really be essential in combating the effects of this chronic stress that all of us are really faced with on a day-to-day basis. Stress is going to be inevitable. I mean, it's going to be a part of life for everyone, and how we manage and respond to it can really make all the difference. So let's talk about some actionable strategies that can help you to navigate this a little bit more effectively. The first thing that I would really pay attention to is understanding toxic exposures. So first and foremost, it's essential to recognize day-to-day like toxic encounters that we face. And when I say toxic, I'm talking about primarily with the people that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, and then also our mindset, not necessarily toxins from the environment, though those can be problems as well. Really understanding toxic people, toxic mindset, and toxic self-talk, and being aware of this, really just being aware of it, because a lot of us get stuck in this rut where we will say things and we will talk to ourselves in a negative way, and this also feeds in to the stress that we perceive, because it's it's interesting, but not everyone, if you think about this, not everyone handles stress the same way. And that's because everyone's perception of stress dictates how their body responds to it. So first of all is just becoming aware of maybe toxic relationships, stressful people in your life, and then how you talk to yourself. You're in control. So being aware allows us to take steps to minimize the impact of these people and our own self-talk. The second thing that I would consider is think about your gut health. We talked about how the GI tract is really one of the primary areas. It's a gateway to all of these problems that can happen to our immune system and our systemic health. Our gut plays this really pivotal role. So incorporating foods that have prebiotics, which are basically fibers that feed the bacteria in our gut, probiotics, so this would be like fermented foods that actually have living bacteria, incorporating those into our diet, and even postbiotics can really be helpful. Now, postbiotics would be foods that have bacteria that have broken down the food that they eat, and as a result, they have released that they have created what we call postbiotics as a result of their metabolism into the food. So there are all of these in the gut, for example. There are bacteria that will break down different types of fibers and lead to the production of short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. And so this is a postbiotic that can actually be really helpful for the intestinal, the cells that line the intestine. So think about incorporating things that can help you to feed the fibers that your gut bacteria need, to re-inoculate or get good bacteria from fermented foods into your diet, and then also how can you increase postbiotics, which are really, you're going to increase postbiotics primarily through the consumption of probiotics, the actual bacteria, though I will pretty frequently recommend the use of butyrate in the short term to help support the recovery of the gut. So try to get things in like spices and herbs because they have really good prebiotic effects. They have a lot of different polyphenols, these chemicals that feed the bacteria and have a lot of potential benefit. And just keep in mind that a healthy gut can really improve a lot of these negative consequences of the stress response that can lead to all of these problems with our immune system. So keeping the gut healthy is a critical piece of the puzzle. The next thing that I would recommend that you consider is dietary balance. And what I mean by dietary balance is that you don't have a diet that's very restrictive for a long period of time. Now, there's a lot of debate around what is the ideal diet. And I will just tell you that I can't answer that because a lot of the recommendations and what people say is an ideal diet is based on data that is really observational and surveys, and we just don't have the solid double-blind randomized controlled trials. I mean, good luck with that. So there's a lot of data out there about what is probably the best diet. And what I can tell you is that in practice, I find that recommending diets to people that remove a lot of the commonly reactive foods that we see, based off of testing and whatnot, is helpful. So a type of diet, for example, might be like an autoimmune paleo diet or following more of like a Mediterranean style diet. But it's important to keep in mind that everyone is going to have different responses. I mean, when I work with people that are autoimmune, I'll often recommend that we run different types of tests to look at food proteins that they are immunologically reactive to. And no one has the same reactivity to foods. I mean, no one. We all have this unique fingerprint that is, unique to us. We don't have the same food reactivity. So it's important to understand that everyone is individualized, that we're an individual and that you're going to need to take an individualized approach to the diet. There are people that are following diets like, for example, like a carnivore diet or even like vegan diets, and they are doing really well and thriving. So, I'll leave that debate for the people that really want to debate it. I think what you really need to look at is how are people responding? How do they feel? How are they functioning? And in practice, one of the most common strategies that we'll use from a dietary perspective is an autoimmune paleo diet. And that tends to be beneficial. So dietary balance can be really helpful. The other things to keep in mind are rest and mindset. So we talked about mindset a bit and our perception of stress and trying to get our response to stress under control. Recognize it, acknowledge it, and then choose your response. Choose how you're going to respond. And that's easier said than done, but those are the first steps in taking control. And then resting is just a huge piece of the puzzle too. A lot of people are, they're wired and tired, they can't get to sleep, and they are really just sleep deprived. And our bodies and minds really need downtime to recover and rejuvenate. Our immune system, it's incredibly important for us. So, really try to focus on a few things. Cultivating a positive mindset, and then focusing on, I think for me, focusing on gratitude and just being mindful can be really helpful and powerful tools when I'm day to day and then when I'm under stress. Another strategy that you might want to consider is looking into emotional freedom technique. It is sometimes referred to as tapping, and it's a really powerful tool. The way that it works is by tapping on specific meridian points while you voice positive affirmations. It helps people to relieve stress and helps them with emotional challenges. And there's some actually really good data out there that supports this. So, you can look up EFT and tapping or emotional freedom technique and learn more. Another strategy that I'd like to share are breathing exercises. And breathing exercises can be extremely helpful as well. They help to tap directly into the stress response and help with the regulation of the autonomic nervous system that I mentioned. So the way that we breathe really can influence our stress. And a lot of times people that are stressed will be breathing shallow, and that's definitely not what you want to do. So techniques like deep belly breathing or the 4-7-8 method can calm your mind and really help to reduce anxiety. So if you just do that a few minutes a day, it can make a huge difference in how you feel. And if you're really under stress, that's something that you can do. So if you just look up breathing techniques, belly breathing techniques, look up yoga nidra. That's a good one. There's some great resources out there for you. So those are things to keep in mind as well that can have a direct and immediate influence on your stress response. I also want to mention therapy, because with this epidemic of chronic stress that we have, sometimes talking it out is a great approach. And whether that's, there are different types of therapy, obviously, but whether that's something like cognitive behavioral therapy or just counseling, having someone, a professional to discuss your feelings with can really provide some clarity and relief. So I definitely want to mention that to you. And, I've become aware of a lot of counseling services that are now available online. So it's easier than ever. You don't necessarily have to walk into an office. You can talk to a therapist right there, through your phone or through your computer. So it can be really convenient. Another thing to keep in mind and tool that you want to use that can have a huge impact, I know it does for me, is physical activity. So really never underestimate the power of a good workout, or even, as I mentioned, like just a brisk walk. It can make a huge difference. Just getting outside, seeing green, getting some sun can have a huge difference. And it really helps you because physical activity can release those feel-good hormones, the endorphins, which really act as natural painkillers and mood elevators. So physical activity is a tool that you absolutely want to consider using. Another tool to use is meditation and mindfulness. We already touched on mindfulness, but taking a few minutes each day to meditate can really help to reset your mind. And if if meditation isn't your thing, then you can try practicing mindfulness, which is just being present in the moment. And those can be really helpful strategies. And just keep this in mind. It's not about eliminating stress, but it's about managing it. It's about how we respond to the stress, because that has a huge influence on what happens biochemically. So just find what works best for you and make it part of your daily routine. If you found this episode helpful, please share and leave a review. It really helps the podcast. And as always, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can also follow us on YouTube and Facebook at the Office of Dr. Brad Shook. You can join our Facebook group, the Greater Hickory Thyroid Support Group with over 11,000 members, and you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Brad Shook. And remember, together, we can make a difference. As we wrap up this episode, remember this: life will always have its challenges, but how we respond to them makes all the difference. Prioritize self-care, listen to your body, and try to seek balance. Your health and well-being are worth it. Until next time, take care and be well. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed hanging out behind the scenes with Dr. Shook. You can also talk with and learn from Dr. Shook through Facebook Live on our Facebook page at the Office of Dr. Brad Shook. Don't forget, you can also get access to our videos, guidebooks, and thyroid programs at www.drbradshook.com. Oh yeah, and don't forget one more thing. We can change the world one person, one family, and one community at a time. Until next time, remember, today is your day, and no one will tell you who you are and what you can be.